Good evening, everyone. I'm Randy Holhut. I'm news editor from the Commons. And welcome to BCTV's annual presentation of Meet the Candidates. And we have tonight with us our 6 candidates for the select board posts. We'll introduce them in a moment. But first, I'd like to introduce the panelists for tonight who will be asking some questions. First, we have Mel Motel, who is the executive director of the Brattleboro Community Justice Center, and Melanie Winters. I should know the competition better. She is the day editor of the Brattleboro Reformer, a great daily newspaper. Now, for the combatants in this bout of democracy, in this, well, no, not this one. We have 2 candidates for the 3-year term for Select Board. We have Ben Copeland and Tim Wessel.
Hello.
You may know Tim. You see him every Tuesday, or every other Tuesday. Then we have 4 candidates for the 1-year term. 2 of these people will be your select board members going forward, depending on who you choose. And they are from left to right: Oscar Heller,
hello,
Elizabeth McLaughlin, FRANZ REICHSMAN, and
Hi.
Daniel QUIPP. So here's how things will go tonight. The candidates will have 90 seconds of an opening statement, and then we'll ask questions, myself, Mel, Melanie, and then it'll be opened up to the audience. This is also being broadcast on Facebook Live, and if you're riding the Facebook tonight, you can send us questions, and Jackson over here will take them, and through the magic of pen and note card, they'll be transferred over here, and we will ask them to the candidates. And they will have 1 minute to answer each question, since we have so many of them tonight. So let's begin with the candidate statements, and it is all yours, Mr. Copeland.
Thank you. My name is Ben Copeland. I've lived in Brattleboro for 45 years. I moved here from California, actually after having served 2.5 years in the Peace Corps in South America. But I have 3 children and my wife, and I was offered a job, actually while I was in the Peace Corps, to be interviewed by the CEO of the Holstein Association. And I had worked in the dairy industry in California for some years and had grown up on a dairy farm and graduated in agriculture from the University of Illinois. But the reason that I am interested in pursuing a seat on the select board is that the town's been awfully good to me and my family. And I feel some responsibility to help shape its future, And I also think that there are some ways that we can make it better. Thanks.
And you did that in 64 seconds. Very good. But I'm sure that Mr. Wessel will use the full 90 seconds, and you're on the clock.
Not sure what you're trying to say. Thanks, everyone, and thanks to all the panelists and BCTV for putting this all together, and Core Trowbridge, way back in the shadows, who was instrumental. So I've served on the Brattleboro Select Board 2 years now, and I really do enjoy it. Just to go back a little bit, I've lived in Brattleboro area for 12 years, and I've lived in Windham County for almost 20. I'm 51. I currently have a 29-year-old son, and I mention that because I also have a 1-year-old son. And it's a little apropos, I think, because it gives me a range of perspectives, you might say, for all kinds of stages of parenting, if you will. I've been a renter in Brattleboro when I came here in about 12 years ago. Now I'm a homeowner in Brattleboro, and I'm also a sort of a reluctant landlord. So I have those perspectives to bring to the board as well. I know I don't have much time, but the board that I currently serve on has worked well together. We've done a lot of great things, and I look forward to the opportunity to serve some more on the Brattleboro Select Board.
Well done.
Close? close to.
Only 5 seconds. Mr. Heller.
Thank you. My name is Oscar Heller. I'm running for one of the one-year seats on the Select Board. I'm a small business owner. I'm currently chair of the Town Energy Committee. And as a little aside, the way I got to be sitting here is I grew up on Long Island in New York. And when I was 14, my parents shipped me off to summer camp here, my first time in Vermont at Camp Wabanong, which some of you may know. And it was for someone who'd never been off Long Island, which has its charms, but there's a lot of noise, there's car exhaust, strip malls. Coming up the interstate, crossing the border into Vermont from Massachusetts for the first time was an incredible experience. And then ending up in the most extreme way at this very rustic camp on the side of a mountain where the cabins only have 3 walls and you basically sleep out in the open, was the sort of thing that, I mean, it made me want to move here and live here hopefully for the rest of my life, which I did in 2014. I moved here also from California. And since then, I've started a business. I've gotten more involved with town government, and I think that I hear often from people that they're worried that there are fewer younger people in Brattleboro, there are fewer new businesses, and I think I can bring a valuable perspective to the Select Board. Thank you.
A bit over, but we'll forgive you for that. Ms. McLaughlin.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Elizabeth McLaughlin. I moved here with my husband 12 years ago, and we each started our own small business. At the same time, my daughter, Mary, started at BOHS. And I believe I'm exactly the type of person that Brattleboro is looking to move to Brattleboro, someone who can move and start their own business and bring their children and be a part of the community. I have a consulting business. I'm an urban planner, and I write environmental impact statements and get permit applications. And I made my friends here in Brattleboro by volunteering, at first on the steering committee for the Empty Bowls Dinner for many years, and also on the board of the Drop-In Center. And here I learned about the needs of the community for hunger and other needs. And I also learned how to help. And I think Brattleboro is a caring community, and I want to be a part of the continued care of the community as part of the Select Board. Right now, I currently serve on a number of boards. I'm a town meeting rep. I'm chair of the Planning Commission and have been on the Planning Commission for many years. And I'm also a new member of the Finance Committee, where I'm learning about the town budget. I'm on the Skate Park Committee, and I'm a representative to the Wyndham Regional Commission. And I look forward to serving, perhaps with one of these gentlemen, 2 of these gentlemen, on the Select Board.
Thank you. Mr. REICHSMAN.
Thank you. My name is FRANZ REICHSMAN. I first came to Vermont as a summer camper, living in a 3-sided cabin out in the open air. It wasn't Camp Wabanong, it was Farm and Wilderness Camps up in Plymouth. 49 years ago, I came to the Brattleboro area for the first time and built my family's summer place up in Marlborough. And then 33 years ago, moved here full-time after finishing my medical residency in Brooklyn, New York. I've been politically active for a very long time. I really started maybe age 14, but I was the chair of the Wyndham County Democratic Committee back in the 1980s. I've been sort of a sporadic candidate at times when some odd notion got into my head that that was a good idea. Ran for the legislature 1 year and the Senate, the Vermont Senate 1 year. I've been on the Representative Town Meeting Finance Committee for the past 4 years, reviewed the town and school budgets every year, learned a lot about that. And knowing that there were a couple of open seats coming up, I was actually a little bit worried that maybe there wouldn't be good candidates for the open seats. Turns out there's 4 good candidates for the one-year seats, and I'm happy to be among them.
And Mr. QUIPP.
Thanks. My name's Daniel QUIPP. I grew up in the UK, as probably you can tell, and I've lived in Brattleboro for just 4 years. I've been coming here since about 2004. My wife is from Newfane and grew up there, and we lived in the UK for a time and then came back to the States, lived in New York City, and then, like many people do, moved from the city up to here. I want to be on the board because I grew up in a single-parent, fairly low-income household, and then spent much of my life trying to kind of dig my way out of like the trap of poverty. Most of my work has been around communities that are experiencing a lack of resources. So I was a teacher at sort of high school level and middle school level in the East End of London and in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. And then when I came to Brattleboro, I worked for the Boys and Girls Club at Westgate in West Brattleboro, and also worked in an alternative school program, and then later at Putney Central School. So I currently work at Sevca doing crisis fuel assistance to help people keep their homes heated. And for me, it's really important that there's somebody on the board who has an experience of poverty and a desire to see people's lives improve in this town. So that is part of why I would like to be elected for this position.
Thank you. Which is a nice segue into my first question, which is, Brattleboro, is it stratifying into 2 towns, one that caters to tourists and one that people struggle to get by in? Do you believe that the class divide is growing in this town, and what can be done about it? And we'll start with Mr. Copeland.
Well, the time that I have been in Brattleboro, things have really changed. It concerned me. There's a higher poverty level in Brattleboro than I remember in my past here. I have served as both a substance abuse crisis worker, and also I've worked with individuals with disabilities, finding them employment, and I work with people who are homeless, having worked weekends for a number of years at Morningside Homeless Shelter. And I see that situation of low-income folks having a more and more difficult struggle to live in Brattleboro. And Brattleboro is not, there are other towns that probably are more difficult to live in low income. But Brattleboro certainly has its challenges in making a good life for everybody who wants to be here.
Mr. Wessel.
Sure. It's a very good question. It's been a concern of mine for quite a while that the middle of Brattleboro is being squeezed, the middle income of this town, and it's a very large part of how this town generates revenue is the property tax payers. And I really feel like we must concentrate on both keeping expenses down while providing the essential services that we're all used to and we all know and love, but also raising revenue in a way that's not on the backs of the property taxpayers quite as heavily as it has been in the past. 85% of all revenue that the municipal budget comes from is from property taxes. And I've been putting forward some ideas, and one of which is fairly famous, the 1% local option sales tax, which would take a minor amount of pressure, but a significant amount of pressure off of the backs of our property taxpayers in the town, and I think that's very important.
Mr. Heller?
Yeah, I agree. I think this might be the core problem that Brattleboro faces right now, because my two issues that I've been most focused on in terms of policy and research have been, one, economic development, and two, homelessness and poverty and drug addiction in the community. And it's a really tricky balance, because if the town economy suffers, the town can't provide the kinds of services it wants to. It can't help people the way it wants to. But at the same time, there's a risk of gentrification, basically, of bringing in businesses and people with more money who displace people who've lived here, who make it harder for people who've lived here. And navigating that balance, I think, will be maybe the primary challenge for Brattleboro in the future. Thank you.
Ms. McLaughlin?
Yes, I do feel that it is a problem. And I think from the select board perspective, as Tim said, there really are just a couple of options. And one, I agree with the 1% tax, because I think relieving the property owners is a good solution in the middle. But at the same time, I think it's important, and I think what the select board is already trying to do is cooperate with social service agencies, because I think that is the key to meeting the needs of the population. And I know that there's hunger in the school and people on the street. So although it is a nationwide problem, I think it's also home here in Brattleboro.
Mr. Reichman?
I certainly think it's a problem, and I'm going to just piggyback on what Liz said about it being a nationwide problem. The income distribution in this country has been getting more and more spread out. I mean, we're back to almost the 1890s by now, and it's really awful. And at the national level, it means a lot of work has to be done to correct this. At the local level, one of the things I like the most about Brattleboro is how seriously this issue is being taken. I've been to a number of select board meetings where this has been discussed, and planning for day work programs and very important initiatives that I hope will come to fruition. The Housing Trust has been very active. Groundwork expansion, I think, is of real importance. All these things give me hope that we can mitigate the national trends here in Brattleboro.
And Mr. Quipp?
So the question I heard was what can be done about it. And I think that there are a number of things that can be done. For starters, we already we appropriate money for human services organizations through our budget process. And we can be more generous with that appropriation. We can do more in collaboration with organizations like Groundworks, like Youth Services, like SEVCA. I was talking with one of my colleagues this morning who primarily works in housing, and she says that the clients she's working with are not able to find a place that is affordable, and those that are already housed are often struggling to keep that housing. So the more that we can do to alleviate those burdens, the better.
Okay, all right, my question, some of you actually touched on it already. I wanted to discuss the issue of finding new and more sources of revenue to pay for the extra services that Brattleboro seems to need to provide as a hub of the region, whether it's healthcare, economic hub, education hub. Things gravitate here. A lot of jobs are here. Extra services are needed. That requires money. Some of you already talked about the 1% option tax. What other types of revenue options are there that could help relieve the growing burden on local taxpayers?
And we'll begin with Mr. Quipp.
Thanks. I'm right now in favor of the 1% local option tax. Initially, I was probably going to be against it because sales taxes are, kind of regressive. But I feel like it's one instrument that we could use. You know, income taxes, local income taxes, city, state income taxes could always be rejigged to make them more progressive. Like an income tax has the potential for being a more progressive tax, and certainly as a foreigner who came from a national health service, I'm often told by Americans that we couldn't afford it here, and the amount that I pay in health insurance costs each month comes to about $800 out of my couple of $1,000s take home. So we could certainly afford it.
Mr. Reichman.
The town's very limited in what means of raising money it has access to. There's an effort underway to try to change that the town manager, Peter Elwell, has been heavily involved in, and I think that is something we should go forward with. I think we have to talk about spending levels. Everybody's got great ideas about what to spend money on, but also have to think about the old Yankee creed, make it do, use it up. Anyway, I'm doing a little George W. Bush thing here, but anyway, the idea that we have to pinch pennies when we can, I think, is important. I've been saying for the local option 1% that I'm leaning towards supporting it, but I'm still listening. And I've actually done some research just over the past couple of days, some academic work that shows that maybe the increase would have a significant effect on the downtown.
Yes, I'm. First of all, the town does get an income from the 1% rooms and meals tax, and I'm in favor of the 1% sales tax, mostly because it would include internet sales, which is new and considerable. But the hub question is slightly different. What the select board has been trying to do is to work with other large stressed communities within the state and try and get the state to provide what is essentially something akin to urban aid, because all these towns have the same issues that we're facing, mostly about income inequality. And so this is an entirely different initiative to try and get a different type of tax for communities like Brattleboro, and I'm in support of that.
Yeah, so I was recently opposed to the 1% sales tax. I was saying 60-40 opposed. I've heard a lot of good arguments in the last week or two, including some from Tim. And if it came to a vote today, I would support it. I think there's a lot of potential there, and it's one of our few ways to raise revenue from people who don't live in Brattleboro, which is really important. I would like to talk about something a little different quickly. There's not a lot of time, but another way to approach this is, instead of looking at taxes, is to look at economic development, bringing in more money that way, which to me looks like, I think the era of the 500 job factory in Vermont, in Brattleboro, is probably over for good by Vermont's choice largely, but I think there's an opportunity for Brattleboro to make itself attractive to smaller businesses, younger businesses, often technology businesses, which could bring in money, broaden the tax base, but they're largely green. They're people working out of offices with laptops, and I think that could be a really interesting way forward.
Well, it's a very good question. Setting aside the 1% local option tax, which is literally the last of 4 options that we have, as a Dillon rule state, we have to follow the rules that the legislature lays out before us. And we have one more option for raising revenue, and that is the 1% local option sales tax. But to set that aside for a moment, we need to pressure the state to let us talk more about the hub idea and for the limited self-governance initiative that is being put forward, hopefully, with the assistance of VLCT. And we're not paid a lot here on the select board, as you all know. We're mostly glorified volunteers, but I am taking the time tomorrow morning. I'm getting in a car with Peter Elwell, and we're going up for a town meeting Town Governance Day up at Montpelier. And what we'll be doing is advocating for the limited self-governance proposal, which is modeled after West Virginia, who did they moved from, or they are moving from a Dillon's rule state to a home rule state using these very successful models. And we'll be advocating for that together.
And Mr. Copeland.
I favor the option sales tax. We need another source of income to the town besides property tax. Property tax is, I think, for a town this size and with the number of people we have that are either really young or much older, the property tax is really high. And anything that we can do to not raise it more, I would be in favor of. I think that we should do everything we possibly can to get young people with good educations, college degrees, to come here, particularly if they already have a business or if they have an education already that would fit with our emphasis here, like solar panels and energy conservation and things like that. I happen to have 2 grandsons. I've sent them employment applications, and they live in Arizona.
Okay. Hello, everyone. In 2017, town officials expressed a commitment to increase diversity, inclusion, and equity in our town government. In your role as a select board member, what specific steps would you take to support our town to move towards this goal, and how would you ensure accountability?
And we'll begin with Mr. Copeland.
Yeah, I'm not too sure I actually understand your question. It has to do with, I'm not sure I understand your question. Can you repeat it again?
I sure can. In 2017, town officials expressed a commitment to increase diversity, equity, and inclusion in our town government.
Okay.
So in terms of racial diversity, economic diversity, last I heard of our 200 or so town employees, all of them are white, and that
Yes.
was brought up. And
Yes.
so, which may not be true, but you can
Yeah.
address that, other
Right.
folks. In your role as a select board member, what specific steps would you take to support our town to move toward that goal and ensure accountability?
Well, I think we do have to have more equity. I think the people that I associate with generally from week to week pretty much agree with that, particularly within town government. But part of that has to do with education and having people have the education and training that they need in order to be fully functional contributors to the community. And then I get concerned because we've had 2 good colleges really leave Brattleboro in the last year. SIT has no more students there. They have students in foreign countries. They have residence halls that are essentially empty. And Marlboro College is now seeing everybody, their students, up in the Marlboro area and not on South Main Street or in Brattleboro, which not only affects the opportunities for people to go to school here at the college level, but it affects the number of people who would normally be employed as teachers and as service people. So I think providing educational opportunities, and particularly those kinds of opportunities that lead to business in Brattleboro, would be something that we should certainly encourage and do everything we possibly can to spur business.
Mr. Wessel.
First of all, I think I would confirm that I don't think we have a full-time employee of color currently yet on the staff here. We do have some part-time employees through Recreation and Parks, just to make that clear. And the staffing level is about 140, 150 total. So we recognize that as a goal, definitely. And when we speak with Peter Elwell about the HR director, and we are speaking, I should say, currently, that is one of our criteria, somebody with experience with diversity and equity in our community. we have to be thinking about it, because if you see who floods out of our school these days, the range is somewhere about 20% of children of color in this community. So we definitely should be reflecting that percentage in some way better than we are now. And so I fully support moving more in that direction. But we certainly can't also have a quota system. That's not going to work either.
So I spent the 10 years, more or less, before coming to Brattleboro in two big international cities, Montreal and Los Angeles, which are obviously much more diverse than Vermont. And I miss that very much. I think it's one of the main weaknesses of Vermont as a place to live, is that it's far less diverse, and that I literally believe that a community, the more diverse it is, the stronger it is. End of story in basically every way. In terms of tangible steps to take, I think you need to make sure that you're casting a wide net, that you're interviewing as many different people as you can for a job. You're making sure that it's not just friends, networks, because those in Brattleboro, those will be less diverse. And I think another thing that's really important is to make sure that people who aren't white men have an explicit seat at the table and are actually making decisions. It's not just that diversity is on people's minds, but that people with different perspectives are making decisions. And finally, I just want to say that I regret that as a consequence of this election, the select board will become, at least in some way, less diverse, which is a shame. So I apologize.
Ms. McLaughlin.
Well, yes, I think that it's clearly an issue, and I think the best thing to do would be for the town's human resource department to really cast a wide net, both for diversity but also geography. I think people need to be recruited to come and work here, and not just people of color, but LGBT and gender. I do know that the new planner for the town is female, so that's a nice stop. But basically, I think recruiting people and making them feel welcome is the key.
Mr. Reichman?
I don't have any specific steps to recommend, I think. I already think of Brattleboro as a welcoming place for people to come to. I don't want to speak for anybody else's experience of that, but that's how I see it. I think from the discussions I've heard at select board meetings, and I've been to a number of them over the past few years, the issue is considered pretty much all the time. It comes up quite frequently. I guess my question would be, well, what can you do? We can open our doors and we can offer opportunities, and then people have to decide to walk through the doors and take the opportunities. And I'm not sure how you get to that point. And I would also say that it would warm my heart if I saw a few Republicans involved in town affairs too. Diversity cuts that way as well.
Mr. QUIPP.
Thanks, Franz. So I think that the town needs to be asking the question, why do people of color, why do gender non-conforming people, why do LGBTQ people not find themselves represented in town staffing? I also think that Vermont needs to wake up to its racism. We've seen with Kaya Morris that this is a state that if you're an outsider, you can look at this state and think that it's some paragon of virtue. But we have plenty of issues to do with discrimination and outright racism here. So folks can't just have the door opened, but they need to feel like they are genuinely welcome. And I also, was talking with Steve Barrett at Public Works today and thinking about how, thanks, how folks in Brattleboro already need to feel like there is a path to a good, well-paid, good benefits job here for them. And we can do more to make inroads into that as well. So it's not just about people from away.
Someone is watching on Facebook tonight. We have a question.
Right.
Okay. This comes from Christine Connell. What do you think the town should do in downtown for residents who have major accessibility issues with parking, shopping, and the library?
And we'll start with you, Mr. Quip.
Well, it should be accessible. No, I don't mean that flippantly. I mean, like, it's that simple, right? We have an aging population, many of whom already experience accessibility issues, and as we move forward in time, that's only going to increase. So in all decisions about how we build things, how we change things, we need to make sure that it is entirely accessible and ADA compliant. And it's not acceptable to do anything other than that.
Well, I guess I'll hop on board with that. It's not something I've looked at in any detail. I just read about it in one of our newspapers the past few days. I'd be in favor of moving the buildings back and widening Main Street. It's just too narrow. That's the way it is. That would help at least with parking issues. And maybe accessibility to businesses and stuff like that. But what Daniel said is exactly right. We got to do it. We got to figure it out. I can't say there should be more parking here or there or the other place, but clearly, it's the law. You got to do it.
One of the things I said earlier was that the good strength of Brattleboro is that we cooperate with social service agencies, and the one that's interested in that question is AARP. I know the planning department has teamed with AARP to make for more open access to streets. I know the Public Works, when they redid elements on Main Street, they had more handicap curb cuts and so forth. So I think that the town is aware of this issue and working with others to make improvements.
Yeah, Daniel, when I laughed at your answer, it wasn't because I thought it was a silly answer. It's just such a simple sentence that is really the entire answer to that question. These things need to be accessible. We need to be thinking about everyone involved. And at the town level, we have the opportunity to make those kinds of decisions and make those kinds of plans. So that means it's the town's responsibility to make sure that these things happen. So I think you're exactly right. Thank you.
Mr. Wessel?
I serve on the Traffic Safety Committee here in my capacity as a select board member. And so sidewalks and safety of pedestrians and accessibility is one of the things I really get excited about talking about. And what we need is to shift a little bit of our town priorities and funding to traffic safety and sidewalks and ADA requirement needs. Some of that is being done very well by town staff using federal grants and other opportunities when they come about. But more of it can be done by the town. I think we just need to, as a community, decide that it's a higher priority. And I think it's incumbent upon us to really understand the struggles of those that have the most problems with accessibility in town. And I do want to just throw out a PSA because I've discovered recently a lot of people are not aware of this, that if you have a handicap sticker in the town of Brattleboro, you can park at any spot in Brattleboro without paying. And that includes all of the meters, all of the surface lots. It's something that everybody should know and pass along. That's not a solution, but it's something that a lot of people are not aware of.
And Mr. Copeland?
I have certain kinds of activities and places I go and people I meet each day of the week. It keeps my week lively. But on Wednesdays, I go to the senior center and I have lunch. And after lunch at 1 o'clock till 2 o'clock, there's a discussion group of seniors who've had lunch together, but we have opportunity to talk about anything that we think that is on our mind. And parking is a big one, particularly because the senior center has a specified parking area. And you're only supposed to, and they have signs up, and we have permits that you can get from the senior center administrative people, but people who are shopping or working or whatever else goes on in town are using those spots. So the people with disabilities and people particularly who are of age don't have access to those spots. They think it's a problem. I agree.
At this point, we're going to open it up to the audience and line up at the microphone. Elbow each other at once.
George Carvel, I'd like to ask you all to look into the future, put on your magic hat. Tim, you mentioned the home rule, okay? Mm-hmm. If we get it, what things do you think the town should consider doing with home rule that it can't do now?
Begin with Ben. You're up first.
Oh, I'm up first. I'll have to admit that I don't have a good answer for that. I would have to do a fair amount of research about home rule, what it allows and what it doesn't, and how it best fit in Brattleboro before I could give you an answer.
Mr. Wessel?
Well, I don't want to scare our legislators into thinking that we're looking for full-on home rule, because I think that'll freak a few people out. But I think just the ability to look at how we assign our property taxes. Everyone should know, if you're not aware already, that property taxes go, I think this year it might be 54% to school funding. So a lot of those formulas has to be looked at, and how property tax comes back to, income tax comes back to the towns is a very interesting thing. And I think when towns have some limited self-governance, they're going to have some more control over the money that the towns literally send up to the state, and then have to struggle a lot to get money to come back to the people who are actually generating that revenue.
Mr. Heller?
So this is actually something I've looked at a lot, and I, especially by giving specific possibilities, I particularly don't want to scare legislators with what might possibly happen if they granted limited. But some of the options that other towns, municipalities have done, first of all, you're no longer just tied to the property tax in terms of the big pillars of tax. You could consider something like a local income tax, which can be made to be more progressive than a property tax. With all of these things that I'm about to talk about, unless steps were taken, the town would bear the burden of tax collection in a lot of these cases, which isn't a small burden administratively. Some other ideas are gas tax. I read a study of some towns in Oregon, smaller than us, that put, for example, a 1-cent tax on a gallon of gas and brought in $120,000, $150,000 a year. I'm going to run out of time. There's a lot to talk about here, but gas tax in particular is a good example of something that lets us raise revenue, again, from people who don't live here, which is really the thing we suffer from. So tourists, people using the interstate, and gas taxes are unlikely to drive people out of town because burning gas to drive to buy cheaper gas is not really a winning proposition. And I'm out of time. So thank you.
I'm going to stick to the two areas that I think are the most likely. And this initiative for local town government, as it was explained to me, what it's going to do is offer flexibility for the town to do things like get a stop sign without having to go run around through Montpelier. So it's subtle, but it's just going to make life easier for the town to function without being overburdened by state control. But the other thing that I'm in favor of pursuing, and we talked about earlier, was this hub town structure, because if we had more flexibility to get state aid for stressed towns, that would be a real win for Brattleboro, because most of the surrounding towns don't have the same problems that we do.
Mr. Reichman?
I don't know the details of home rule versus Dillon rule, but just pursuing the idea that there could be other ways of getting money to provide needed services and maintain needed infrastructure. To me, if we're looking to the future and what could possibly happen, I think part of the problem is that we rely too much on town government for raising money and not enough on county government. I think that it would be good to have a way that the surrounding towns could pick up some of the cost for the services that they take advantage of here in town. I think in states where counties have more active taxing authority, that's a good thing to share the burden equitably. On a completely different note, I think the possibilities of a Brattleboro credit card, similar you might have for a Red Sox credit card or something like that, where there's a fee that goes to the sponsor. We could look at instituting something like that. Credit for the idea goes to my barber, Remy Anderson.
Yeah, thanks. I also endorse Remy Anderson as a good barber. And I think that, in this situation, it always feels like you have to come up with a definite answer to a question, right? Like we're sitting here and it's kind of high pressure. And I'm going to reserve the right to keep an open mind and learn more about what things are possible, right? So we don't really know what Brattleboro is going to be like in 10, 20 years. We've got a town plan, and it's a pretty good one. But we have to do a lot of stuff along the way. And I think that investigating ways to raise more revenue for the town, whilst keeping the town affordable and making sure that the ways that we raise revenue are not regressive, are really important. And I've been a teacher for a lot of my life. I've been a learner for all of it, and I look forward to learning more about that.
We have another Facebook question.
Okay, this is from Ralph Mima. Do you think it's the role of the select board to actively encourage people to shop more locally and less online? And if so, how would you do it? And by how would you do it, I'm guessing he means how would you actively encourage people to do so?
And we'll start with Mr. QUIPP.
Hi, Ralph. Thanks for watching. I don't think it's the role of the select board to tell people how to shop or do much of anything. Vermont's state motto is freedom and unity. We can't really tell people what to do other than obey laws, and we're not about to institute a law that says you must shop in Brattleboro. I think that the Downtown Brattleboro Alliance and the Chamber of Commerce already do good work to promote Brattleboro, and our local businesses and our downtown is a vibrant and good place to be. I think we need to do more in order to make either the town more affordable or people's economic situations better so that they can afford to shop here.
I think it's the role of Ralph Mima to ask an energy-related question.
I think so.
Get on it, Ralph. We still got another 40 minutes. As far as the shop local thing, I don't see the select board having a distinct role in that. I think that's kind of everybody's job. Shop local, what can I say? If someone came up with an idea of what the select board might do, I would listen to it, but I don't have any ideas.
I like to shop local, but I don't like to be told what to do. So I don't think it's the select board's role. I do think it's the Chamber of Commerce's role and the Downtown Business Alliance, and they can encourage people to shop all they like. and I think it's a very nice place to shop. So I think it's just a matter of you know, the good thing to do, not necessarily being a good citizen, but the shops are nice. It's nice.
Mr. Allen?
Well, I don't think in most cases it would be the select board's role, and I'm not advocating that it would be the select board's role, but in terms of interesting ideas, I did have a conversation with a town meeting rep about the interesting / crazy idea of some kind of incentive for businesses and people to shop locally, as in a business buying their tools at Brown and Roberts versus at Walmart. Just because, and I know it's a crazy idea, but the reason it's interesting to me is that it's so much better for the town if that money is spent at Brown and Roberts. If it's spent at Walmart, not only are taxes not collected, but it disappears from the community. So the idea of some, I don't know how it would work, but some kind of incentive for people to spend their money locally where it goes right back into the community, and those people ideally then spend it again locally, and that money just never leaves, is a really interesting one that I need to think a lot more about.
I have an answer for that. My husband's a carpenter. He has an account at Brown and Roberts. He gets a discount.
I really want to be able to say yes, because somebody should be saying, yes, it is our role. But as the only sitting select board member up here in this group, I would say no, I don't believe that it's the select board role to encourage local shopping. However, it's definitely my personal mission, and I promote it on my Facebook page, and I talk about staying local instead of sending your dollars elsewhere. But more importantly, I really like the question, Ralph, thank you, even though it's not energy related, because I'm fascinated with the role of the select board and people's concept of what our role is as a select board. And that's a very large question that can encompass many things. David's also here, so I just wanted to acknowledge that, David Scholes. And we talk about that a little bit, but I'd love coming up in the next year, if I'm reelected, to talk about that a little bit more. Like, what is the role of town government? What should we be supporting? And what should we not be supporting and tapping into our excellent community resources instead, and bringing people to a table perhaps, but not laying out rules and stuff. I'm trying to cause a little trouble by going over my time. So.
Yes. But you're getting into Mr. Copeland's time.
To me, the question about how to get people to shop locally rather than online is sort of like having an opinion or trying to motivate people not to buy cell phones. And can you imagine, I mean, I lived in this town where we didn't have cell phones. And nobody did, certainly not the kind of cell phones we have now. I had to get rid of my smartphone because it was smarter than I was. And so I went back to the old flip phone. And I never buy anything online, but I know people who do. And I know this is probably not answering the question, but recently I was looking for something different, interesting, to provide as a gift to my 7-year-old grandson that lives in Guilford. And so I thought, I need to teach him chess. I don't know how to play chess. So I went and I asked the library where can I get stuff on chess. And they said Baker's. They're having a big sale. So I went to Baker's. Dennis Baker told me to go to Walmart because he didn't have any chess or chess books. I finally did, but I didn't buy it online. And I don't know how this board has any influence on whether people use cell phones or don't, or whether they buy things from online or from local distributors. I don't know.
We have a question from the audience.
Question from the audience. Well, this audience member is, first of all, I want to thank you for coming and subjecting yourself to our questions. Certainly appreciate it. I'm Dan Jeffries. I've been a Brattleboro resident and homeowner for the last 25 years. And my question to everyone is as follows. Placing considerations of funding and enforcement aside, would you support passing an ordinance restricting every residence in Brattleboro to thermostat settings that do not exceed 65 degrees Fahrenheit?
We'll start with you, Mr. QUIPP.
Well, as the local climate activist, I think maybe you think I know what. I don't actually really kind of. I don't want to live in this hypothetical world of barring like what we can actually do. Like I want to live in the world of what we can actually do. So I would love for the town of Brattleboro to be able to save as much money as possible on energy and to use as little energy as possible. I don't think that the select board has any role whatsoever in enforcing what people do in their private homes. I also right now work in fuel assistance, and what I'm met with every single day is folks who are not earning enough money to be able to afford a oil delivery or a propane delivery, and that's just like a fact of their life. You know, they're on a fixed income or they're under a low income. And we definitely can do more as a state and as a region to encourage energy efficiency. And Vermont, through Efficiency Vermont and some like state legislation, already does quite well. But we have so much more work to do. The housing stock here is super old and poorly insulated, and it is also expensive to get people to insulate their homes. So we need to figure out a way to square that circle. And controlling what folks do in their private homes, I'm not interested in doing that.
Absolutely not.
You know, there's a whole industry in this town based on energy contractors and Efficiency Vermont and energy measures and so forth, and they're to be applauded. But Big Brother with a thermostat, I don't think so.
Yeah, I have to agree that I don't see how you can really leave questions of enforcement out of it, and I can't think, even if I appreciate the spirit, I can't think of an enforcement mechanism that I would find acceptable, that people would tolerate. At the end of the day, you would be talking about going into someone's house, checking where they set the thermostat, and changing it for them or fining them. I don't think that's the way to go. I think there are a lot of other steps the town can take towards encouraging. I'm going to run out of time again, but the single biggest problem with energy conservation, et cetera, in Brattleboro from a town level is that the town only has control over its buildings, its spending, its fleet of vehicles. Am I out of time?
Yeah.
Okay. So the biggest challenge is somehow getting into the residential and commercial areas, which the town has no control over. There are ways to do it. There are programs I've seen that would incentivize people to get audits that will show them some of the benefits, even economic benefits of weatherizing their own home, taking those kinds of steps. But I think those are the ways forward that I see.
Well, once again, I find myself wanting to be the opposition, but I have to say no as well. And I'll go a little further and say I'm also not in favor of a current question about forcing people to wear long johns and wear cool suits in the summer, which is also, I think it's before town meeting reps coming up. That's a long story. It's a poorly worded change there that some folks want to make. But I really think if you want people to conserve, you have to make it, there has to be incentives for people to turn down a thermostat, increase the energy efficiency of their homes with weatherization programs and things like that. But certainly when a thermostat is at 65 in a leaky house, it certainly isn't 65 in that house, as we all know. You know, in a modern, very tight house, it might be. But you know, we certainly couldn't go in that direction. Speaking of what's the role of town government?
I think it's an interesting question. in the sense that I certainly don't believe the town or the select board should have any influence on what temperature people should keep their homes. However, they should focus on what temperature they keep the town buildings. And I think there we could actually save some money. I think the energy efficiency in town buildings can be improved significantly. I have a friend who's a justice of the peace, and he was asked to marry someone in this room on a weekend, and he was told that don't dress too heavily because it's going to be really hot in here on Saturday. We have to keep the pipes from freezing. Well, building is as old as most in town, but I think the energy efficiency of this building and other town buildings can be improved a lot. And we have more rights to be concerned about that than we do about homeowners, where they should keep their thermostat.
We have another question from the audience.
Hi, my name is Carl. I've lived in Brattleboro for a good 33 years or more. The first thing I want to say is I want to thank all you candidates for being here tonight. I'm really impressed with every one of you, and I think it's a tribute to our community that we can get people of your caliber to stand for office. It's really wonderful. I think we have some wonderful people in this community. To me, what I have seen in my time here is that our biggest challenge lies in precisely this area of how can we make this work? How can we pay for the things that we want to have this community provide? And you've talked about some of the possibilities, this 1% tax and so on. As a homeowner and a property tax payer, I'm glad that you're not going down the road of increasing property taxes. Whenever I have a conversation with my friends, whether they're in Colorado, New Mexico, California, wherever they are around the country, when I tell them what our house is assessed for and what our property taxes are, they're blown away. They say, my God, you got to be kidding me. Your property taxes are that high? So I think this is the area that's the challenge, maybe for Vermont at large, but certainly for our community. Particularly when we live across the river from a place that has no property tax and no sales tax.
Correction, they do have a property tax.
I'm sorry. No property tax, no income tax.
No sales and no income.
But even friends of mine in New Hampshire who have homes comparable to mine say they pay less property taxes than I do. So anyway, I think that's the issue. And to me, rather than as a default going to, okay, what tax might we create in order to fund what we want to do, maybe a better avenue to go down is how do we invigorate the business community? I don't think any of you mentioned the impact that this 1% increased tax might have on our local businesses. I'm not a business owner. Some of you are, from what I understand in your opening statements. What kind of input have you gotten from the local business community? Because these folks are up against a really difficult situation, which has just been touched upon. You know, we all buy stuff online. Let's get real, right? It's so easy to do. It's so quick now with Amazon wanting to deliver stuff by drone, and that's only going to get worse. So I worry about places like Sam's, like Brown and Roberts, like all the retail shops.
Sir, your question?
So my question is, do you have, first of all, do you have an awareness of this whole dynamic? And I'm sure you do. Secondly, do you have any thoughts on how we can improve kind of the business climate here in town? And I mean that kind of in the broadest sense of, as you probably know, all of the young people in Brattleboro, they move out of state because they can't get a job here. So there's something that's not right about this picture. And I don't know what the capacity or the function of select board members might be in this area. This is a big question. But I'd be very interested in hearing your thoughts on it. Thank you.
We'll start with you, Mr. Quipp. Because I think the question was local option tax affecting businesses, of keeping young people in Vermont.
Keeping young people here, how do we energize the business community, get more business to come that will pay property taxes?
Well, so, I spend like a lot of my week downtown. I used to work from home, which really meant that I worked from like Amy's or the co-op or the library. And I think that our downtown needs to serve the people that live here, right? So what I hear from some people is, if I want to get X thing, like X useful kind of thing, unless I can get it at Brown and Roberts, mostly I got to go over the river. I hear from some people that the Brattleboro downtown is for tourists, and certainly I've seen evidence of that being partially true. But I also think that we have a really vibrant and interesting downtown, especially if you compare it to towns of a similar size in our region. So I would like for the Downtown Brattleboro Alliance and the Chamber of Commerce to continue to do their work promoting the town, and I would encourage other Brattleboro residents to think about the relationships between how they spend their money and what happens here. So I support local businesses because I know that those people are my neighbors, and what happens to them also matters to me.
I have a secret plan to address this problem, but I'm not going to reveal it until after the election. No, it's a big question.
Too big.
And there are some current issues like whether to support the Downtown Brattleboro Alliance and Chamber of Commerce in their request for funding to promote Brattleboro. That's going to come up at town meeting in March. But I don't think that's a panacea by any means, and there's a lot of issues with the proposal as they put it forward. Do the taxpayers of the town want to pay agencies in town to promote the town? I don't know. That's what's coming up. That's the question. But how to solve the issue, I think that's the major question, the major sort of umbrella question facing Brattleboro at this point, is how vibrant is the town going to be, and how will it find the ways to pay for the things that it needs to pay for?
The second part of your question about getting young people to move to Brattleboro is something that's near and dear to my heart, because I would love nothing better than my adult children to come back to Brattleboro and work. But I think it's a process of, the economy is changing. Many of us here at this table work in our own businesses from home on our laptops or Amy's. And, I think that there will, in time, be more of a structure for more jobs that are completely different that we haven't thought about, and my children will come home and take those jobs. And as far as the 1%, I think that, and getting, commerce, I think it's something that behooves all of us, but I think there are people whose job it is to improve the commerce in the town, and that's the Chamber of Commerce and the DBA.
So I think that I think there's an opportunity. I touched on this a little before. I think there really is an opportunity for Brattleboro to try to attract younger people, modern businesses, and with them, young families, people who will buy houses, people who will buy offices, renovate those offices, increase the value of that property, spend money downtown, etc. I worked for a couple years at a marketing agency, not doing marketing, but I saw how it worked, and I know that marketing and promotion is often, those are empty words to people sometimes, but I think this is a case where Brattleboro, if people really understood it, if my friends who I tell about Brattleboro and they're jealous of all the, I look out my window and I see the mountains, the air is clean, there's no noise. I mean, there's noise, but not like a city. If they really understood what it was like to live here, they would move here, they would move their businesses here, but they don't. I never lived in a small town until I came here, and it's a scary proposition to someone who's never been to one. You think you are going to be you're not going to have the infrastructure you need for your business. You think there's going to be no nightlife. You think it's going to be a very upsetting experience, and Brattleboro isn't like that. And I think if we make that known, we can make it really attractive to that kind of economic development.
Such great questions, and I have no idea where to start, and it's only a minute. You know, on the select board, we can go on, and that's why we have 4-hour meetings. So, but we don't have that time now. I just want to address one thing about the 1%, and I like to couch it in this way because people don't often think about it in this way, and I think it's important that you do. We currently pay on very select few items here in Brattleboro and all through Vermont 6% on sales tax on a very select few items, which makes it less regressive in my argument. So in order for it to have an impact on downtown, you need to think about the shopper who is okay with paying 6% and doesn't even realize they're doing it, quite frankly. But somehow when it goes to one more penny that the town of Brattleboro will get for its revenue, they suddenly will throw down the gauntlet and say, that's it, I'm going to New Hampshire. It's just not going to happen. I believe it's fear-based and not evidence-based, and I believe that we don't have another Brattleboro just over the river. We have Walmart, but you know what? People who shop at Walmart already shop at Walmart. They're not going to change their behavior. So unless we eliminate all sales tax, which isn't going to happen with this state. So I like to put it in those terms because when you think about it, there's not a lot of evidence, Art Wolf aside, that things are going to collapse downtown if we have this very important revenue source coming into Brattleboro.
And Mr. Copeland.
I think I would wish that we would bring more young families into town. They spend more money than people who are 65, 70, 75 years old and already have a closet full of clothes they bought for 30 years ago and are not going to buy anymore. They may buy a new car occasionally, but they're not going to be the big spenders, people of age. Young families are. And what young families want, they want their kids to be able to grow up with good educations. And so it worries me, as I said before, when we have 2 colleges that move out of Brattleboro. We need to make our educational system attractive and be focused on folks getting good employment, and then we need to be focused on getting our wages up so they become more attractive. I was an employment consultant for 13 years for vocational rehabilitation. I provided employment services for people with disabilities, and I was able to get 100 jobs for people every single year for 13 years. I do not believe that it's hard to get a job in this town. It does take work, but there are jobs available. They just don't pay enough.
Another question from the audience.
Hi, and so did I hear and understand correctly that you all unanimously are supporting the 1% sales tax increase?
No,
Who said no, that they didn't support it?
I was vague about it.
I got the impression that you were all supporting it, and from that presentation, I am so disappointed that although I was just running as a District 2 municipal representative, I am now writing myself in for both the Select Board 3-year and 1-year positions. My name is Ricky Rosati, spelled RIKKI RISATTI, and I will not support that tax, and I will offer so much more creative solutions than what I've heard tonight.
I guess that's not a question.
It's not a question, but it's a good stopping point for this to move to the final segment of this program, which is the closing statements. And since I'm feeling generous right now, and we've kept to the times quite nicely, you'll get 2 minutes rather than just 1. So you'll each have 2 minutes to speak your piece about your candidacy. And we'll begin with Mr. Copeland.
Well, first I will reiterate the fact that I feel, having received a lot of benefits from living in Brattleboro for a long time, that I feel kind of a responsibility to see that Brattleboro continues to be or becomes improved as a vibrant community from a business standpoint. I want to be a part of helping to create a better Brattleboro. That's why I'm interested in this. In terms of concerns that we haven't mentioned tonight, one of the concerns I think we should have in Brattleboro as citizens is health care, and try to get a primary provider in this town. All the doctors are leaving. I don't know whether it's because they get more money, but I suspect so. That's why most people take different jobs in different places. But it's really a problem to get a primary care provider in this town, and I think that's serious. And for young families, that would be a deterrent. High-priced childcare and difficulty in getting health care will not motivate young family members to come with children to come to this town. We need to recognize that and to do everything we can as a town to see if we can solve those problems.
Mr. Wessel.
Well, first of all, thanks everyone involved in putting this together. It's continuing to be a fun night. I love Brattleboro, and I really enjoy serving on the select board. I'd love to do it some more. I feel I'm pretty good at it, listening to different people's opinions and thinking about different ideas and moving forward in sensible but progressive ways. I wanted to just throw out that a few things that I'm excited about if I continue on the board. Some things that we haven't talked about tonight, which is Putney Road. I've been working on some safety issues on Putney Road through the Traffic Safety Committee. And the Putney Road Master Plan, if you haven't seen it yet, is an exciting living document at this point. And through the state funding and federal funding is going to come in and completely transform what Putney Road looks like, one way or another. And I think it's for the good. It's a terrific thing to look forward to. I look forward to our new Hinsdale Bridge, which I swear is coming. It's a very long time coming, and the plans for that are very exciting, and I'm super excited to see a walking bridge. Our current bridge over there next to Whitestone Station is going to be becoming a walking and biking bridge, and we're going to be able to take our feet and our bikes and our wheelchairs and everything over across the river and sort of have a new experience with the river there. So that's very exciting to sort of guide along from the board. There's a whetstone pathway possibilities that is very exciting. I can share on my Facebook page an EPA document that's wonderful that has some visioning of what we can do to have a pathway that continues the path right by the co-op and all the way down through some of the revitalized areas that we'll be fixing up, again, mostly with federal funds. I'd like to solidly look into municipal broadband, because no one's mentioned that tonight, but I bet you guys are angry that I just said it. And finally, 2 words, skate park. Thank you. That's one word. Thanks.
Yeah, I'd also like to thank everyone who put this together, everyone who came, people who are watching on Facebook, sending in questions. And on that note, I'd just like to say that we talked about a lot of things tonight. There's a lot of things we didn't talk about, but even the things we did get to, you know, those, I've been having conversations for 2 or 3 weeks with people multiple times a day, and these are hour-long issues or longer. These are not 1-minute issues. So anyone who's still interested, I just invite you to, you know, get in touch with any of us. And I'm always willing to meet up downtown. I've driven out to strange parts of Brattleboro at 7 in the morning to meet town meeting reps before work. Every time I have one of these conversations with somebody, I just get more inspired and more energized. And this is it's cheesy, but this is the purest form of democracy. And having these individual conversations, making the individual connections, it's amazing. If I'm elected, I'm going to keep doing this. I won't be able to do it 5 days a week like I've been doing now, but I always want to hear what people have to say and have conversations, even, you know, the arguments I have about 1% sales tax at loud volume in the works this morning. Those are good too. Anyway, so thank you very much.
I think the select board position could be a very, mundane job, but it's also a reflection of our values. And I think it would be very interesting to see the interplay of those two things. And I really would look forward to continuing to work for Brattleboro. I have professional experience that would be of interest, and I have a lot of volunteer experience. Also working on all those initiatives that Tim talked about, the new bridge and the Putney Road plan and the skate park. So these are all great things. The Whetstone pathway is also a very interesting plan if you're not familiar with it. And so I would really want to hear from you. I would ask for your support. I'd like to represent you, and I'd like your vote. Thank you.
That was very old school to ask. I like it. And I actually have some old school stuff here too. Look, there's this little handout thing. But I'm bridging the old school with the new school, which is to say, please, if you're interested in more, I think everybody, all of us have a Facebook page and or actual web page about us. So I've been putting a lot of stuff up on my FRANZ's Selectboard page on Facebook. So if you're interested, please go there and you'll hear more about the types of things we've been talking about tonight. I'm very pleased to say that we have 4 good candidates for these 2 positions, and I hope everybody will think about it and choose 2 of us. I think it's going to be a great select board. I'll be happy to be on it, and if I'm not on it, well, it'll still be good. I've been on the Finance Committee. I've reviewed the budgets for years now, and I'm taking a leaf from elsewhere that says that work is love made visible, and I'm going to say that the budget is love made visible in the municipal realm. If you want to know what people really support, it's in those pages, and the Select Board puts in a lot of work on that, and it's some place where I feel I can play a meaningful role. I also want to have people more involved. I spent a couple hours today at the River Garden talking to people about whatever they wanted to talk about. It was worthwhile. I would continue that as a select board member. I don't think people should only have access to the board at the Tuesday evening meetings. It's not much of a conversation. And I also want to say that whoever doesn't get elected to the board should be on the Finance Committee. I want a commitment from everybody because we need a strong Finance Committee, and I hope people will actually consider that seriously.
2 minutes feels like a luxury, so I'll leisurely explain what I want to say. So there were a number of things that I didn't talk about today that you can read in today's Reformer article. Thanks, Chris, and the Reformer. One of the things that I talked about in there was making a firm commitment for Brattleboro to phase out its use of fossil fuels to heat its buildings, and perhaps over a probably longer time frame, phase them out in its vehicles. I've worked as a climate activist for 350.org most recently on national campaigns to do exactly that. And I do that work as a volunteer with 350 Vermont. I'm also really interested in thinking about our transportation. And again, that sort of goes back to me for the fact that we have a aging population for whom accessibility is going to become increasingly an issue. And we have a population that has a significant number of low-income folks in it. And we need to do more to make our town bus network more accessible. We need to actually make it work for people to get to and from a job. When we're talking about economic development, that might be one piece of it. And the final thing that I want to leave you with is that I think we can still do more to make our town government more accessible. These Tuesday evening meetings that happen throughout the year are not accessible to many folks. And I know that current select board members and previous ones as well are open to having conversations throughout the week and wherever you find them. But we could also choose to actually take these select board meetings to other places in Brattleboro. It's not, we're not tied to the desk, I don't think, Tim. And in doing so, we could learn some things about Brattleboro that maybe don't get brought to these meetings on Tuesday evenings. So I would like you to vote for me. And if you want to find out a little bit more about me, you can go to my website, danielquipp.com.
All right. For some housekeeping duties, because of course, you've heard from the candidates tonight, you've heard questions from the audience, you've heard questions from Facebook. But now, you probably want to know what to do about going to vote. So, early voting started today. So if you want to get down to the town hall tomorrow and take out an early absentee ballot, you can do that. Stop by the town clerk's office. The town clerk's office is open 8:30 to 5 p.m. So early voting goes right through March 4th. That's Monday, 5 o'clock is the last day to get an early ballot. You can also, there's same day registration for voting in Vermont, so you can, if you show up at the polls and be registered if you're not already, although it's best to register ahead of time. And voting this year, once again, will be at the American Legion, Post 5 home at 32 Linden Street. And the polling hours will be 7 o'clock in the morning to 7 o'clock in the evening. It's a nice, accessible place, and from what I heard from Hillary Francis, the town clerk, there's been a long-term commitment to using that as the polling place for the next few years. So no more uncertainty about where to go. So March 5 is when you make your decision, and you've heard from our candidates tonight. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you to you and the viewers. And hey, there's somebody else who wants a word.
I wanted to mention, since this select board part is over, that there's also,
Use that mic.
I'm David Scholes. I'm on the select board currently and on the school board, but I'm not up for election this year. There are people who are up for election on the school board. One of them is here tonight, Emily Murphy-Carr. And the library is going to sponsor a forum, I believe, at 7 o'clock on the Wednesday the 25th for the school board members to have a forum. So I wanted to make sure people know about that, and also take time to talk to Emily on your way out.
Because they're not the only show in town. So get out and vote when it's time. And hey, there's another one.
About one more thing, yeah. In the bid to make town government more accessible, we also put on a couple of brown bag lunches at the River Garden to meet the candidates. I don't know if all of us will be there for both of them, but trying to be. 20th, noon at the River Garden, and the 27th.
No, 28th.
28th, thank you, noon. And you can find all this stuff on our Facebook pages and whatnot. Yep.
Okay, so there you go.
And Ben's flip phone.
That's right. I get an email.
So on behalf of BCTV, I'm Randy Holhut, and thank you and good night.
Why is it so hot in here?
It's kind of cold.
We are.